we've got a better plan, we think. And so Samuel says, a king will take your sons for his army. A king will take your daughters to bake and cook and make perfume. A king will take your fields and redistribute them. A king will tax your income. A king will take your servants and livestock and use them for his purposes. So really you want a king? Oh yes. It's worth the cost. Give us a king. The Heart of the Story is a companion resource that I've been using each week along with reading the story. And many of those things that you think are my wise and insightful points in the sermon come right out of this book. And I want to read a page from this for you because I think it really illustrates what's happening here when Israel asks for a king. Samuel's spiritual advisors know the two brothers have to be removed. And they call a meeting to convince Samuel to make a change. They have the right diagnosis, but the wrong solution. That is, Samuel's sons can't take leadership. But the solution of a king, that's not God's plan. Samuel takes this as a personal affront, a challenge to his own leadership. So he seeks God's advice. Essentially, God says, they're not rebelling against you, but against me. And they've done it repeatedly. Since I rescued them from Egypt, tell them they can have their king, but that it's going to cost them. When Samuel goes back to his advisors and tells them that life under the king will limit their freedoms and press their children into the king's service, they still ask for a king, finally giving the real reason that we will be like all the other nations. It's a bit comical, but mostly sad, isn't it? The price we're willing to pay to be like everyone else. In the lower story, all the other nations surrounding Israel have kings. But the Israelites, all they have are priests and prophets leading them. Religious people. Kings, they wore regal robes and jeweled crowns. Priestly garments were just simple and drab by comparison. Kings could make decisions on the spot. Religious leaders checked with God first, conferred among themselves. Kings, they commanded massive battalions of horse-drawn chariots, and they carried warriors dressed in armor and brandishing swords and spears. Religious leaders told men to blow their horns and shout or carry candles in clay pots. Why can't we be like everyone else? Simple. In God's upper story, he wants something better for us. He wants us to be so different that we attract others to him and his ways. Everyone else indeed have their kings, but they also have rampant idolatry and barbaric behavior. They worship pagan gods and seek no guidance from the one true God on how to live with and treat each other. If the Israelites were to become like everyone else, how could God build his nation? How would they be able to attract others to him? Faithfulness is following a pattern, and God is calling his people to faithfulness. But in the midst of that call, he gave them what they wanted, and it would be to their detriment. You see, this king, and certainly he's exactly what Israel wanted as a king. You heard how he was described. He was well built, and he was a head taller than everybody else. Isn't that what they wanted? Someone who looked like a king? But how did he behave? Truthfully, like a king. He refused to submit to God's plan. He was impatient, and he didn't wait for Samuel to come to the sacrifice, and so he began to offer the sacrifice himself. Have mine own way, Lord. Have mine own way. That's one example of his disobedience. Another one is this. Saul came out of battle, And though he had received strict instructions to demolish everything, to kill everyone, not to take anything alive, Saul knew better. He acted like a king and decided he had the right to some of the spoils from that battle. Decided that he had a right to take a trophy to go and show everyone else, maybe the other kings, how successful he was in battle. What's the problem? He allowed King Agag to live. Inconsequential? Maybe because we haven't gotten 10 more chapters into the story yet. But here's what's going to happen. A descendant of Agag, an Amalekite king, would one day threaten, a descendant of the spared Amalekite king Agag, would one day threaten the entire nation of Jews with complete annihilation. His name was Haman the Agagite. And the story is Esther. Many, many generations later, the result of one king's selfishness to keep a trophy for himself would nearly destroy the nation of Israel. One of these things is not like the others. Saul took matters into his own hands, unwilling to submit to God's will or follow his instructions. Eli, Hannah, Samuel, they all modeled dependence on the Lord. They took time and committed energy to seeking God's plan. They lived faithfully because they followed the Lord's pattern, trusting that he would provide what was best for them. Faithfulness is following a pattern, and our faithful living begins when we will earnestly say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening."